Welcome back to Laura Collins, the channel where we cut through the noise and break down the world's most critical events with the depth and clarity they actually deserve. I'm Laura Collins, and if you've been following global news over the past few weeks, you already know that something historic has been unfolding in the Middle East. But today, we are going deeper than any headline has gone, because what happened on February 28th, 2026, in the waters of the Persian Gulf is not just a military story. It is the story of a regime that bet everything on one final move and lost. We're talking about Iran's decision to close the Strait of Hormuz, the artery through which 20% of the world's oil flows every single day. We're talking about the U.S. Navy's response, which was so fast and so total that analysts are still struggling to process the scale of it. And we're talking about what this moment means for the future of the Middle East, global energy markets, and the survival of the Iranian regime itself. This is one of those videos you are going to want to watch from start to finish because every section builds on the last. And before we dive in, if you are new to this channel, welcome. This is where serious geopolitical analysis lives. Hit subscribe right now and turn on your notifications so you never miss a breakdown like this one. And when we're done, I want you to drop your thoughts in the comments. Did Iran make a fatal miscalculation, or was this trap set for them all along? Now let's get into it. To understand what happened on February 28th, 2026, you have to understand what Iran looked like in the days and weeks before that morning. Because by the time Iran made the decision to close the Strait of Hormuz, it was not acting from a position of strength. It was acting from desperation, and there is a critical difference between those two things. The Iranian regime had already absorbed a series of devastating blows following the Roaring Lion and Epic Fury military operations. These were not warning shots. These were precision campaigns designed to systematically dismantle the pillars of Iranian military power from the inside out. Key regime commander Khamenei had been killed and buried under rubble, along with 7 top officials and more than 40 high-ranking military commanders. In a single morning, Iran lost the operational brains of its entire armed forces. The damage did not stop with personnel. Air defense systems across multiple provinces had been destroyed or rendered non-functional. Missile depots had exploded in chain reactions that stretched from Zanjan all the way to Kermanshah. The facilities that Iran had spent decades and billions of dollars building, the infrastructure it believed would make it untouchable, were going up in smoke. What was left? No functioning air force, a gutted command structure, missile infrastructure in ruins. The Iranian regime was running out of options fast, and in that desperate moment, it turned to the one asset it had protected and preserved above all others for decades: the Strait of Hormuz, the card it had always promised to play if it was ever truly cornered. On February 28th, 2026, that moment arrived. At noon on February 28th, 2026, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Navy did something that no one had ever done before in the modern era. They broadcast a blockade announcement, not through diplomatic back channels, not in a classified communication to foreign governments, but on open radio frequencies. Every ship in the region heard it. Every naval command in the world heard it. Every energy market on the planet heard it within minutes. The message was simple and absolute. This is the Navy. No ship of any type is allowed to pass through the strait until further notice. Let that sink in for a moment. With one radio transmission, Iran attempted to shut down 20% of the world's daily oil supply and 20 to 25% of global LNG trade. This is the waterway that Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, the UAE, and Iran itself depend on for the vast majority of their energy exports. This is the choke point that Europe, already cut off from Russian pipeline gas, relies on for much of its liquefied natural gas supply. Closing it, even for a few days, has the potential to trigger a global energy crisis of historic proportions. The reaction was immediate. Chinese fleets halted operations and waited. Japanese tankers reversed course and anchored offshore. Greek vessels changed route entirely. Images flooded international media of Saudi, Iraqi, and Emirati crude oil tankers sitting completely motionless at sea, waiting for instructions that weren't coming, Oil prices began to spike toward $110 and $120 a barrel. European energy markets went into alert status. The Iranian regime watched the reaction and believed in that moment that its plan was working. They believed they had the world exactly where they wanted it. Iran's calculation was cold and logical on paper. Force the United States and Israel into a ceasefire by making the global economy the hostage. Drive oil prices high enough that Gulf states would pressure Washington to stand down. Create enough economic chaos that the political cost of continuing the war would outweigh the military objectives. It was a gamble, a massive, desperate gamble. But there was one factor Iran had completely failed to account for. The United States Navy did not spend decades studying, modeling, and preparing for a Strait of Hormuz closure scenario just to be surprised when it actually happened. The moment Iran's broadcast hit the airwaves, a pre-planned operational protocol was already being activated. And that protocol had one guiding principle, ruthlessly simple and brutally effective. Do not just stop the threat. Eliminate the infrastructure that makes the threat possible. Not the ship. Destroy the port that houses the ship. Not the missile. Destroy the facility that builds and stores the missile. Not the commander. Eliminate the entire chain of command. This was not reactive improvisation. This was a pre-built playbook being executed with precision. On March 1st, 2026, President Trump posted on Truth Social, and every word he wrote reflected an operational reality that was already complete. I have been informed that we have destroyed and sunk 9 Iranian Navy ships, some of which were relatively large and significant. We are pursuing the rest. They will soon be floating at the bottom of the sea, too. In a separate attack, we largely leveled the naval headquarters. Other than that, Iran's Navy is doing quite well. That final sentence deserves to be read twice. Ice-cold sarcasm wrapped around an operational fact. According to U.S. Central Command's official statement, the strikes included the sinking of Iran's Jamaran-class destroyer, a 1,500-ton warship that was the single most advanced vessel Iran had ever built domestically. It was the flagship of the Iranian Navy, the symbol of Iranian naval capability and national pride. It now lies at the bottom of the Gulf of Oman. Iran's port facilities at Bandar Abbas, Chabahar, and Bushehr, the backbone of its naval operations on the Persian Gulf coast, were simultaneously hit. Fast attack boats were destroyed at their moorings before they could even leave harbor to attempt the swarm tactics Iran had trained for. Iran's Hormuz strategy was not improvised in a moment of panic. It was a carefully constructed doctrine built over decades, resting on 3 distinct pillars that were designed to work together and reinforce each other. Understanding why all 3 collapsed simultaneously is key to understanding just how complete this military defeat really was. The first pillar was physical closure of the strait through force. Iran had spent years deploying Chinese-made C-802 coastal defense missiles to its islands in the Persian Gulf. It had trained and equipped hundreds of fast attack boats to execute coordinated swarm tactics. The theory being that a massive coordinated assault by small, agile, missile-carrying vessels could overwhelm even the most advanced large warships through sheer numbers and speed. Iran believed this doctrine gave it an asymmetric advantage that could neutralize American technological superiority. This pillar collapsed when aircraft launched from U.S. carrier strike groups, combined with Tomahawk cruise missiles fired from submarines, systematically destroyed every coastal defense battery and every fast attack boat, not at sea, but at their moorings in port, before a single one could even reach the open water. The second pillar was economic pressure. By driving oil prices into extreme territory, Iran planned to fracture the coalition of Gulf states aligned with the United States. It targeted Dubai's airport and port infrastructure. It attacked Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait simultaneously, expecting fear to drive them toward neutrality. Instead, the exact opposite happened. These simultaneous attacks created a Gulf coalition of unprecedented unity overnight. Saudi Arabia pledged its full military capabilities against Iran. the UAE abandoned its decade-long policy of carefully maintained diplomatic neutrality with Tehran. Iran had attacked its neighbors and forged its own opposition. The third pillar was an ultimatum to Gulf states: remove American military bases from their territory or face continued strikes. The message was designed to terrify. Not a single nation complied. Jordan went further than neutrality. It publicly announced that it had shot down 49 Iranian missiles and drones, actively fighting alongside the American and Israeli front. Iran sent a threat and received a declaration of opposition in return. There is one detail from February 28th that, more than any other, captures the full scale of Iran's military collapse. It is not the number of ships sunk. It is not the destruction of the naval headquarters. It is this: the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Navy fired on its own vessels in the Persian Gulf. Friendly fire in the middle of their own blockade. Iran's forces attacked their own fleet. This is not a technical malfunction. This is not the kind of mistake that happens because of bad weather or equipment failure. This is what happens when a military force loses its entire command structure in a single morning and is then asked to execute a complex, coordinated naval operation without leadership, without coordination, and without a functioning chain of authority. It is the clearest possible signal that the Iranian military at this moment is not a coherent fighting force. It is armed chaos. To understand how this happened, you have to understand who was killed at the Beit al-Rabari command compound on the morning of February 28th. IRGC Commander-in-Chief Mohammad Pakpour, Defense Minister Aziz Nazirzadeh, Chief of Staff Abdul Rahim Mousavi. These three men, along with over 40 senior commanders, represented the complete decision-making apparatus of Iran's armed forces. Every tactical order, every operational decision, every coordination signal between branches of the Iranian military passed through this command structure. That structure no longer exists. The ships at sea received their orders to enforce the blockade, and then the command center that would guide them, redirect them, and coordinate them was gone. What remained was a collection of armed vessels operating without unified direction in a contested war zone, surrounded by one of the most powerful naval forces ever assembled in that region. The friendly fire incident was not surprising. It was inevitable. An army that loses 40 senior commanders in a single morning does not know what to do next. And at sea, that confusion becomes fatal. Here is the number that puts everything in perspective: the total displacement tonnage of Iran's entire navy. Every destroyer, every frigate, every fast attack boat, every support vessel it had is approximately 90,000 tons. A single Gerald R. Ford-class aircraft carrier displaces over 100,000 tons on its own. Iran's complete naval force was outweighed by one American ship. And the United States didn't send one carrier. It sent 4 fully operational aircraft carrier strike groups into the region: the USS Gerald R. Ford, the USS Abraham Lincoln, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, and the USS Harry S. Truman. Each of these strike groups includes not just the carrier itself, but at least one nuclear-powered submarine, multiple Aegis-equipped destroyers, and guided missile cruisers. Each group, operating independently, carries enough firepower to overwhelm the armed forces of most nations on Earth. Against this force, Iran deployed a navy that was already degraded, already leaderless, and already operating without air cover. The outcome was never in question, not to military planners and not to anyone who looked at the numbers honestly. The operational execution was total. 9 ships sunk. The naval headquarters at Bandar Abbas leveled. Fast attack boats destroyed at their moorings before executing a single swarm maneuver. Iran's sea mine inventory, a capability it had developed over decades as a key element of its Strait denial strategy, rendered useless because the mine-laying vessels were destroyed before they could reach open water. The threat that Iran had carefully constructed and preserved for 30 years was dismantled in a single operational window. What remains of Iran's naval force is a collection of damaged or trapped vessels operating under no coherent command, proven by the fact that they opened fire on their own ships. The headline that Iran no longer has a functional navy is not commentary or exaggeration. It is a precise description of the mathematical and operational reality on the water today. Every major geopolitical event reshapes the board, and the Hormuz crisis has moved pieces that will take years to fully settle. Let's be precise about who gained, who lost, and what the world is looking at next. Russia is the short-term beneficiary. Surging oil prices provide immediate relief to Moscow's sanctions-pressured budget. A prolonged and intensifying conflict in the Middle East pulls American strategic attention, military resources, and political bandwidth away from Ukraine. From a narrow tactical standpoint, Moscow benefits from every day this war continues. But there is a deep and unspoken anxiety among Russia's strategic elite that goes beyond short-term gains. Watching Iran, a well-armed, well-funded, regionally powerful ally, get completely dismantled in a matter of hours by American military force is not reassuring for a country that has spent years testing the limits of American resolve. Moscow's silence right now is not confidence. It is calculation. And underneath the calculation, it is fear. China is watching with extreme caution. Beijing publicly condemned the American and Israeli operations, with Foreign Minister Wang Yi calling them unacceptable aggression against a sovereign nation. But China's condemnation stops at words. China's own energy security, its factories, its economy, its political stability, depends directly on the Strait of Hormuz remaining open. Direct military intervention on Iran's behalf was never a realistic option for Beijing, and it will not become one. Iran has lost on every measurable front. Its air force was destroyed on runways in the opening hours of the conflict. Its navy has been sent to the bottom of the sea. Its command structure is buried in rubble. Its Hormuz strategy, the one move it believed could force the world to the negotiating table, triggered the full and devastating deployment of American naval power rather than stopping it. And instead of fracturing its enemies, it managed to unite them into the broadest counter-coalition in Iranian history. Most analysts now expect Iran to seek ceasefire terms within the next 24 to 72 hours. The more urgent question is what happens inside Iran's own borders. With the regime's iron fist, its military commanders, its ideological leadership gone, and with citizens already gathering on rooftops in Tehran to watch the collapse unfold, the next hours may determine not just the end of a military campaign, but the fate of the regime itself. And that is the full picture. Iran spent decades building what it believed was the ultimate deterrent, a stranglehold on the global energy supply that no nation would dare challenge. It played that card when it had nothing left. And the world watched it burn in a matter of hours. The navy that closed the strait is now at the bottom of the sea. The command structure that ran the operation is gone. The fast attack boats never made it to open water. The swarm tactics were never executed. The global economic hostage crisis lasted less than a day. And in the end, the only ships Iran managed to hit were its own. Now I want to hear from you, because your perspective is exactly why this community exists. Did Iran walk into a trap that was set for them from the beginning? Is this the moment the regime's survival clock finally ran out? Or do you think there are moves still left on the board that we haven't seen? Tell me in the comments right now. I read every single one, and I genuinely want to know what you think. If this breakdown gave you real clarity on a story that most headlines only scratch the surface of, please subscribe to Laura Collins, share this video with someone who needs to understand what is actually happening in the world, and hit that like button so this analysis reaches more people. Every share matters. Every subscriber helps this channel keep doing what it does. I'm Laura Collins. Stay informed, stay sharp, and I will see you in the next one.